Hello everyone, and welcome to another week of distance learning. You guys, I hope you guys had a great weekend. I hope you were kind to your mothers and had a great Mother's Day with them. All right, so we have ended the Cold War and we're gonna move on to the next chapter is called To the Present. So we're really gonna move into current events and what's going on in the world today. So we're gonna kind of do a really quick fast forward from the end of the Cold War up to where we are now. And then I'll talk about what you're gonna do about what's going on now, eventually, okay? So I'm gonna briefly go through and cover what's happening in the United States, our leaders, our issues, things we dealt with, what happened in the United States between the Cold War and now, what's going on in Great Britain between the Cold War and now, what's going on and what was going on in France, what was going on in Germany, what was going on in Japan, and briefly China as well, and Russia. All right, so we're gonna talk about that today. That's what I'm hoping to cover here. All right, so I'm going to put some notes up on the screen as I go through this, and that's what you need to write down for today. So hopefully it'll be pretty clear. Basically just kind of some key points with leaders of the countries between the Cold War and up till now. All right, so again, just remind, our books only go up to 2012. All right, so that's where I'm going to bring you, basically is up to 2012, and then even a little bit farther than that, and then I'm going to tell you what we're going to do after that. All right, so the United States, what was going on with the United States between the Cold War and where we kind of are now. So we ended up with Reagan was president right near the end of the Cold War. His famous speech, I wish I could have played that for you, we did it last year, his famous Mr. Gorbachev tear down that wall speech. That was a great time when the Berlin Wall was taken down, and that kind of signified the end of the Cold War. Right. So who was president after Reagan? George H.W. Bush. All right. So he is going to be another Republican president. He was vice president under Reagan. So he's, when I think of when I was in high school, he was the president when I was in high school. So kind of have good memories of him, and of course, or vivid memories of him being president and Reagan as well. So he had to deal with a recession, and so he was forced to raise taxes after he promised not to raise taxes, and that kind of hurt him when he ran for re-election after his one term was over. So of course he lost to Clinton, all right? And then we end up with Clinton for 2 terms. So we have Clinton, of course. He made the economy a big issue. He and Hillary tried to introduce socialized medicine. It didn't quite make it at that point. He introduced the whole don't ask, don't tell thing with homosexuality in the military. And of course, at the end, we have scandals that he was dealing with Monica Lewinsky and some other things. So Clinton kind of ends his 2 terms with the whole Monica Lewinsky scandal. All right, who was president after Clinton? We have George Bush, right? George W. Bush, the son of the previous Bush, George H.W. Bush. So he becomes president in 2000. Anybody know the big event of George Bush's presidency? 9/11. So all of you were born after 9/11, but that was a big event. I was teaching at GCA on that day that happened, and I remember being on the phone with I actually had an adult piano student at that point, and she was telling me what was going on. I was on the phone with her, and at that point it was the teacher's office, which now is a classroom. Anyway, things were a lot different then. But anyway, so George Bush's big thing, he won over Al Gore. It was a very close presidential race, but the big thing that he had to deal with was the 9/11 attacks, and his response to that. He had the Bush tax cuts, which allowed for some economic growth. He was reelected in 2004. He is known for his anti-terror policies, for a thriving economy, and just his traditional moral values. So those are the kind of things that he's remembered for: anti-terror policies, a thriving economy, and his traditional moral values. All right, so he has 2 terms, and then who do we have after George W. Bush? Obama. All right, so in 2008, Obama's elected. He wins over John McCain, who was the Republican candidate at that point, and he is going to promise a lot of fundamental changes. Now, some people were happy with how he approached these changes and some people were not, right? Most Americans were unhappy, either unhappy with his changes or unhappy that he hadn't made enough changes. He, in his second term, of course, he wins the second time over Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. His issues that he deals with in after the 2012 election are climate change, the Affordable Care Act, or as we like to call it, Obamacare, right? And of course, he brings back a lot of troops back from Afghanistan. So that was one of the big things that he was known for. We still have a few troops. We still had a few troops over there at the end of his presidency, but he withdrew a lot of troops from Afghanistan. Some other things that happened in his presidency is that he overturned the Defense of Marriage Act that was made in 1996. So in 1996, the United States Supreme Court upheld the fact that marriage is between a man and a woman. Obama overturns that, and says the definition of marriage as stated by the Defense of Marriage Act in 1996 was unconstitutional. And so now we have, a lot of states are starting to make it legal for homosexuals to be married. He's also going to deal with some other issues, but all of those at the end of his near the end of his presidency. Another one sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Who was elected after Obama? Of course, we have Trump, and that's where we are currently. And so we'll talk more about Trump later, of course, because that is current issues. All right. So that was kind of where we were. Let me back up a little bit. A couple more things about Obama. I knew I had more things about Obama and I lost them on my notes. Sorry about that. All right. So Obama's foreign policy was kind of a big, a lot of things about that. We talked one of those things was the fact that he withdrew troops from Afghanistan. He also had this Iran deal where he was trying to make a nuclear weapons agreement with Iran and the UN Security Council and Germany and the EU. So that was one of his issues. We had the Syrian civil war, which is still going on. Horrific events. Assad, the president or leader of Syria, used chemical warfare on his own people. Horrible mess. All right, so, but Obama tried to help get rid of Assad, but he still promised that he would not send ground troops over to Syria. All right. Obama does remain very pro-Israel. That's been a consistent stance of the United States throughout history, is that we are in support of Israel. All right. He restores relations with Cuba. All right. So he is the first president since Coolidge, Calvin Coolidge, to have diplomatic relations with Cuba. All right. So those are just some of his big foreign policy issues. All right. Next is Trump, and we'll talk about him later. All right, let's talk about Great Britain. What's going on in Great Britain between the Cold War and now? So we had Margaret Thatcher, who was the prime minister there near the end of the Cold War. She was a contemporary with President Reagan. So after Margaret Thatcher, we're going to have John Major. He's going to continue Margaret Thatcher's conservatism and kind of keep a good relationship with the U.S., but also build ties with the European Union. All right, and England is, of course, going to join the European Union. All right, 1997, Tony Blair, the Labour Party, comes in. So John Major is with the Conservative Party. Tony Blair is with the Labour Party. He's going to maintain the spending limits of the Conservatives, but he's going to limit welfare expansion. He is going to be reelected, and then he steps down in 2007. He is prime minister at the same time as Clinton, so just going to keep that in mind. Thatcher was with Reagan. Blair is with same time as Clinton. All right. 2010, we have David Cameron. He kind of is part of a conservative party and a liberal coalition. So he's going to try to balance a welfare state and a viable economy. He is going to institute a little bit more of the socialized medicine, which is going to cause a decline in the quality of healthcare. We know that when you socialize medicine, that's what you get. Healthcare declines, fewer services, longer waits in order to receive care. He also has to deal with a growing Muslim minority in England. So a big issue there is the Muslim Muslims who had immigrated into England, they didn't assimilate into English society. So what does that mean? That means they didn't try to become a part of European culture, of English culture, sorry, or British culture. They wanted to maintain their strong Muslim identity. They didn't even try to join in with English culture. As you can see in the United States, a lot of immigrants that have immigrated over the past couple hundred years into the United States, most of them have assimilated, have adopted American culture, have, even though they may be very German or very Swedish, they have adopted to a lot of American ways of life. The Muslim minority in England was not doing that, and so it kind of became a hotbed of terrorism within England. So David Cameron had to deal with that. After David Cameron, we have Theresa May, all right? She is the second female prime minister after Margaret Thatcher, and she has to deal with, the main thing is Brexit. What is Brexit? Brexit is Britain's exit from the European Union, all right? She was actually unelected into her position. There was, because there was some internal things going on within the Conservative Party, somehow she ended up being the prime minister without being elected for it, and that has to do with some of the way the parliament and things work there in Great Britain, which is a whole nother story. So some of her main issues are Brexit, Scotland calling for independence, and then of course dealing with terrorism and security. All right, and at the end of last year when we were doing this section, she actually resigned, and so we'll talk about who became Prime Minister of England after that, and that will be in our next section when we look at current leaders. All right, Germany. Let's talk about Germany. All right, so Germany after the Cold War is going to shift between conservative socialism and more aggressive socialism. All right, so in 1980s we have Helmut Kohl, who's chancellor. He is going to be a strong ally of the United States and maintain strong ties with us as well as France. Develop some strong ties with France. 1998, we have Gerhard Schroeder, who's a socialist chancellor. He is going to fail to solve the economic problems. Imagine that. And then we're going to move on into, after he's chancellor, we're going to have Angela Merkel. And actually, she is the current chancellor. So we'll talk more about her later, but she is the first female chancellor of Germany. She has quite the story. She was born in East Germany when it was under Soviet control, and so she's got quite the interesting story on how she's a very incredibly bright woman, and just very smart. She was like a chemistry major, something like that. But she helped renew the economy after the socialist, and was reelected several times, and of course she is the current one right now. Some things that she's dealt with was immigration crisis, and then phasing out nuclear power. She actually phased that out, and then dealing with the Eurozone and debt crisis. All right, so that's an issue within the EU. All right, what happened to France between the Cold War now? We have in 1981 Francis Mitterrand, who is the first socialist president of the Fifth Republic. Remember, Francis had several republics. They've gone from republic to dictator to republic to emperor to republic to the dictator, and back and forth. Okay, so France has changed types of governments quite often. Now we're on the Fifth Republic. All right, First Republic was way back with the first French Revolution. All right, we're on the fifth one now. So Francis Mitterrand was the first socialist president of the Fifth Republic. He's going to nationalize industries and begin social reforms. He has to deal with inflation and unemployment. And so then he starts becoming more conservative in his policies after dealing with those. He's going to step down in 1995 because of cancer and dealing with that. He's going to pass away shortly after that. In 1995, Jacques Chirac, nice little rhyming name there, Jacques Chirac is going to become president. And he's going to go back to a centrist government. He's going to have, he's the president, but they have a prime minister within their constitution is how it's set up. So he's going to have socialist and conservative prime ministers underneath him. He is going to shorten the president's term from 7 years to 5 years. So he is president until 2007, when Nicolas Sarkozy becomes president. Sarkozy becomes president. He is only president for 5 years, for one term, and then 2012 he's going to lose to a socialist candidate named with the last name of Holland. So France and Germany underneath Holland are going to dominate the EU. They're going to try to counter the United States for international power and international control. France is not going to want to help the U.S. fight terrorism. They're going to do their own thing. So that's an issue there. Another thing that Holland has to deal with as well is the Eurozone debt crisis, right? That's, again, a financial crisis within the EU. And he also is a very strong critic of Assad, the leader of Syria, who is wreaking havoc on his own people. All right, 2017, in 2015, Holland also deals with ISIS attacks. So that's another big issue that Holland has to deal with in November of 2015. 2017, we have a new leader, and we're going to talk about him as we talk about current leaders. So we'll get you there in a little bit. So Japan, what's happening in Japan? So they're going to, from 1990 to the early 20th century, well, let's back up. They did really well economically after World War II. The United States pumped a lot of help into their economy, and so they're going to do really well. They're going to start to have some problems in the 90s, leading into the early 20th century. They're going to end up with some competition from South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. All right, they have very few natural resources, so that's an issue for them. They are a democracy, so they have a president named Shinzo Abe. All right, and he actually has been president there since 2012, and he is the current leader. So we'll talk more about what he has done. Some interesting things. He is a member of the Liberal Democratic Party, and his economic strategy is kind of named after him. It's called Abenomics, so that's kind of a fun thing there for him. We'll talk more about him as we go into current leaders. All right, China. What's going on in China? So China is the only major communist nation that is left after the Cold War. All right. Of course, we have North Korea, Vietnam, and Cuba, who are also communist, but they are not quite as powerful as China. In the 1990s, they start embracing some capitalism and the desire to modernize. All right, they realize they need to do that in order to keep up with the rest of the world and to really improve their standard of living. So they start doing that. In 1997, they regained Hong Kong, right? So China regains Hong Kong away from the British. They're going to allow Hong Kong to keep its capitalist economy. So Great Britain has set up a capitalist economy within Hong Kong. China's going to allow Hong Kong to keep that. However, they're going to keep tight political control on Hong Kong, all right? In 2001, China is going to join the International Trade Organization, and then that's going to allow a lot of big names, businesses come in. Walmart is going to establish a lot of stores there. We've got Home Depot, we've got Best Buy. All right, so they all have stores now in China. And so, again, they're kind of allowing some capitalist things to help their economy out. The big thing that we've, of course, heard about in China, hopefully a lot of you have probably heard about this, is that they've had a one-child policy for a long time to help with population control, all right? Which has led, of course, to the murder or abortion of millions and millions of Chinese babies over the last 40 years. So that's why you have a couple friends in your class, right, who were saved out of that situation. So we have some Chinese mothers did put their babies up for adoption or left them at orphanages or whatever. So we are very thankful for that.
I'm thankful.
So, but issues dealing with that is because so many baby girls were murdered, were killed, that there is now going to be there's a big, in the years to come, probably in about 4 years, it's actually going to be a big issue with the amount of men versus the amount of women in China. So they're predicting by 2025 that there will be 96.5 million men in China. Of course, the Chinese people wanted baby boys because they would be able to carry on the family name and provide for the family. And so that's why they chose, of course, to really want to have boy babies over girl babies. So by 2025, they're predicting that there's going to be about 96.5 million men in China and only 80.3 million women. All right, so that's a big difference there. And so because of that, by 2050, they're predicting that there will not be enough workers to support an aging society in China. Now, it'll be interesting to see how COVID has affected all of that. I don't know. We'll have to look at that, and that's, of course, something we'll have to look at in the months and years to come. Of course, we know China has been a persecutor of Christian groups, and although they have been persecuting Christians for many, many years, the Christian church, of course, continues to grow. Because of that persecution, there has, it's interesting what that has done for the church is actually kept cults and false doctrine from coming into the Christian church. So it's kept the Christian church pure in doctrine and free from false doctrines. So that's an interesting thing that the persecution has kept. But the church has continued to grow. And actually, there are more Christians in China than there are communists currently. So that's another interesting thing. All right, Russia. So let's talk about Russia. Russia has continued to struggle even from the end of the Cold War up until now, economically and politically. Boris Yeltsin was, of course, the president right after the Cold War, at the end of the Cold War. He was reelected in 1996, and then he's going to resign in 1999 because of health issues and corruption. All right, and then Putin becomes president. So he becomes president in 2000. Even he becomes acting president well after Yeltsin resigns, and then he's elected in 2000. He's going to grow the economy. He's going to make progress in a few areas. However, some things that he does, he's going to develop oil and the gas reserves, which is going to help improve the economy, of course. But he's going to use a lot of undemocratic methods. So Russia is a democracy. Well, in name, at least, it's a democracy. However, he uses some very undemocratic methods to keep control. He's going to put his opponents in prison. He's going to control the media. So, I'm not sure how democratic he is. But anyway, he's going to really strengthen the government in Moscow and really have a greater centralized control over the government. He's going to kind of briefly warm relationships with the West. Now, in 2008, because of term limits, he actually cannot run for president again. So he becomes prime minister, and a man named Medvedev, cannot say his name, Medvedev becomes president. But then in 2012, they're going to flop roles again. Putin's going to become president, and Medvedev is going to become prime minister. And then, of course, Putin still is the current president, so we'll talk more about that and why he is still the current president, if he's following term limits or not. So we'll look at that. All right. We are going to stop there. So your assignment, I'm going to type out in a document for you to look at. But basically, you are going to research the current leaders of the US, Great Britain, Germany, France, Japan, China, and Russia. Brief research. I want you to find out. Tell me who the current leader is. What is their political party? What is their political bent? Are they more capitalist? Or are they more for a capitalist economy? Are they more democratic? Or are they more socialist? Or are they communist? Right, what are they? All right, so tell me about that. I'm gonna write this all out, but I'm just gonna try to explain it right now. All right, you need to tell me, one, how are they responding to the current crisis with COVID-19? What are they doing in response? How is their nation responding to it? How has it been affected? How is the leader dealing with the crisis? Then you need to tell me 3 other issues that they're dealing with. Besides COVID, what other 3 issues is that leader dealing with in their country today? All right, so I'm gonna explain this all out on a piece of paper, on a document as well. You need to have that ready for next Monday. All right, so we're gonna hopefully schedule a Google Meet sometime next week to share what you guys have found out about these current leaders. All right, so your assignment today is to write down the notes from this lecture as I put them across the screen here. So I hope you've done that, so you don't have to watch this again. All right, and then also to begin your research on the current leaders for United States, Great Britain, Germany, France, Japan, China, and Russia. And again, I will have that all written out in a document for you. All right, thank you guys. Have a good day.